In talking about basic interview lighting, the first thing we want to cover are the different positions we're going to find our lights in and the roles that they play. The first light is the key light. That's going to be our main light for the scene or the interview. The next light is the fill light. It's going to balance our key light out. The third light is our hair light. Its job is to provide separation from our subject and the background. The fourth light we're going to discuss is the background light, and its job is to control how the background looks. So now we're going to go over each role and discuss a couple things you want to keep in mind as you're setting up for your interview. The first light we're going to talk about is our key light. That's generally the main light for our scene, and we're going to use that as a reference for the color temperature and intensity as we set our other lights. So generally speaking, and there are many exceptions, but if our key light is balanced to 5600 Kelvin, we're going to choose other lights, a fill light, a hair light, and a background light that are roughly the same temperature, and they're generally going to be of a lower intensity than our key light. That's going to allow for a balanced scene in terms of color, and it's going to keep the focus on our subject. As we're choosing our key light, one of the biggest things we want to keep in mind is how harsh or soft it is. Now, a softer light is going to come from a larger light source. So we can do that by adding modifiers such as a softbox or by bringing our light closer. Now we want to be careful because a softer light source is not always the most appropriate for our interview. Sometimes we want a harsher light source. But as we're starting out, generally, we're going to go for a softer light source because it's a lot more flattering for our subjects. So here we have a 2x3 softbox on a Profoto tungsten air. We're going to compare that to the bare bulb of the tungsten air, and you're going to see just how much softer the light is by increasing its apparent size through the use of the softbox. The next thing we want to keep in mind is what angle do we place our key light in relation to our camera. So here we're going to start with the key light right over top of the camera, and you're going to notice that there's very little shape created on our subject from our light. Now as we move it more off axis and go to 45 degrees and then all the way to 135 degrees, look at how much more dramatic it looks. So as we go off axis of the camera with our key light, we are getting more shape in our subject and we're also getting more dramatic. So the thing you want to keep in mind here is how dramatic do you want it to feel? The other thing we want to keep in mind is the vertical height of our key light. If we light from below, we're going to create light that's very unnatural and scary. And as we go higher to say 45 degrees above our talent, we're going to have a very nice fall off across their face and create very nice shape from our key light. The next light we're going to talk about is the fill light. Now the job of the fill light is to balance out the key. Without it, we can have really dark shadows on the opposite side of the key light on our talent's face. So when we're talking about the fill in relation to the key, what we're really talking about here are lighting ratios. Now you may have heard that before, and an even lighting ratio would be 1:1, meaning that our fill light is the same intensity as our key light. When that happens, we're going to have no shape, and it's going to look very similar to having our key light directly behind the camera. As we dial our fill light down, you're going to notice that the shadows become more pronounced on the opposite side of the key light. At this point, it's really up to you to think about what you're trying to say and how you want the interview to feel. So try playing with the balance between the fill and the key until you get the look that you feel is appropriate. So the other thing we want to keep in mind as we're talking about our fill light is its position. Generally speaking, we're going to want to put it in a complementary position to our key light. That is going to perfectly balance out the shadows created by the key light. If we move it to other positions, what we're going to notice is that we can create pockets of shadow while filling in other areas. The next light we're going to talk about is the hair light. Now the job of the hair light is to provide separation between our talent and the background. This is especially important if our talent has darker hair, skin, or clothing, and we have a darker background. Without a hair light, they could easily blend together, and you lose distinction between the two. The biggest thing we want to keep in mind with our hair light is its position. We're generally going to try and put it as far behind the talent as possible, but we have to be careful that we don't see the light or the light stand in our shot. As we move it more to the side, we have to be careful that we're not lighting the side of the talent's face, unless that's intentional. When it comes to the intensity of the hair light, that's really up to you and the look you're trying to create. A more intense hair light is going to provide more separation, but look a little bit more produced. A less intense hair light is going to be a lot more subtler and feel a little bit more natural. We're generally not as concerned about the harshness or softness of our hair light because it's only providing an edge on our talent. The harshness does become important if we move the hair light more to the side and it falls on the side of their face. But if we are lighting strictly the back of our talent and providing separation from the background, the harshness or softness is much less important. The last light we're going to talk about is the background light. Now, very simply, we're going to use this light to control how the background balances with our talent. There's many situations you're going to find yourself in where you don't need a background light. But the biggest thing you want to keep in mind is, how does your background balance with your talent? If we turn our background light up too much, the background can become very bright and we can draw attention away from our talent. But without a background light, we can often find that the background has very little life to it. A big advantage of the Profoto setup is their wireless air remote. Here we have the key and the fill both set up so that we can control it wirelessly with the remote. If you have a smaller crew or you're tight on time, this allows you to go behind the camera and wirelessly change your light levels or turn your lights on and off. This is so helpful if you ever get in a situation where you want to change looks and you have multiple people coming in to be interviewed. Here we can use our remote to actually change our key from one side to the other. So remember, there are so many different ways you can light an interview. There's so many different things you can do with each light. It all comes down to how you want your interview to feel. Take a moment before you start, before you set up anything, and think, how do I want this to feel? Or what am I trying to say? And then as you set up your lights, look back and see how closely it comes out to what you had in your head.